Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to create a 30-minute page, perfect for beginners, but there might be a few things for those that aren't beginners. I'm working in my DIY art journal that I created from a theater playbill. I glued down this skeleton trees green napkin from NinnysNapkins, and through it you can see the text that was in the playbill. I'm putting the plastic sheets on each side to keep the paint and things from getting on the finished pages that are in my book. Now I'm taking my color inspiration from the napkin. We've got these aquas, the red, the orange, and the blue. Now I'm not going to go with trees for this page, or I don't want to be limited to that. So I want to start adding more layers, and I grabbed my DIY foam stamps, and I'll put a link to that video. And I'm using some of the same colors that I see in the napkin, although I am picking a slightly darker shade. So that light aqua that's in the background, I'm using a darker teal green, phthalo green, I believe this one is. And I'm adding this swirl pattern. This is adding interest to my background. Now I've kept this video pretty much in real time, which gives you lots of time to see what I'm doing. These foam stamps, easy peasy to clean. Just use a baby wipe and wipe them off, or a damp cloth. Now, because I've decoupaged the napkin on top of the theater bill, not only do you see the text, but you also get this wonderful texture to the background from the napkin. There's a few wrinkles here and there, but they just add to the page. So here I'm using a cadmium red, and I'm just stamping this star stamp. Now, things that go down on the first or second or even third layer don't always show fully in the finished product, but they're always there. There's little bits of interest, and that's what really, in my mind, makes for a great art journal page. All those little bits. People ask, do you have an idea of where the page is going? In this case, no, I have no idea. I'm thinking at some point in time, something is going to happen that's going to point me in the direction. Now I got a little extra paint here and there, and you can take this off with a baby wipe, because when I decoupaged that napkin down, I coated everything with the matte medium, and that kind of preserved it. Now I'm back to recycling here. This is the inside of some statement that I got in the mail, and it has this gray toned pattern to it. So I'm just ripping these, and I'm going to glue them down. Now this is going to give texture and that little bit of very subtle patterning. Now the background colors of that skeleton trees napkin is very pastel, and so I went with the gray, thinking I'm going to go a little bit lighter. So I'm just ripping these into different shapes and going to place them down. This is going to knock back some of the stuff that's in the background. It's going to cover it up, and it's going to add one more layer. So the playbill was layer 1, the napkin was layer 2, the stamps were layer 3 and 4, and now we are at layer 5. And every one of these layers is giving something to our page. But now when we look at this page, we don't see the trees from the napkin. But we do get that color, and that color is going to guide our color choices. So if you're a beginner or you struggle with putting together what colors work well together, that's a great way to use the napkins. These are artists. These are people who know color theory. Use their knowledge to guide your choices and expand your knowledge of color, of the color wheel, color theory. If it works on the napkin and it catches your eye, it's going to work on your page. I'm using Liquitex fluid matte medium to glue these down, and I'm putting a coat on top. I don't want raw paper because if I add other colors or fluids of some kind, I want that sealed. And right about here, I'm thinking about that, using that envelope, the inside of the envelope. I'm really liking that. So from now on, I will be opening up all those letters and looking inside and seeing if I've got some patterns to use. Now I'm using this gesso. It is a store brand economy gesso, but mine has thickened up. If yours is a thick gesso, you can do the same, or you can buy thick gesso. I love putting it through a stencil, and I'm using this silicone brush to do that. I've just rediscovered this silicone brush, and I love it for putting the thick gesso through the stencil. Now I'm going to put this in 3 places, and this gesso is going to give me texture, it's going to give me pattern, and it's adding contrast by putting the white in there. And I'm doing 3 places because 3, our eyes, our minds seem to like 3. It looks balanced. I'm just putting this back up here. I figure I want it a little bit more up here. Now off camera, I do clean my stencil. I stop everything. I clean my stencil if I've used gesso on it or modeling paste. You got to preserve your supplies. And then I'm going to make sure that this is completely dry. So there is this gray blue in there, and I have this gray blue from Liquitex. That's the perfect match. So I'm putting it on a piece of acetate and adding a little bit of water. I'm going to mix that up, and then I am going to smoosh with it. When I saw those trees, it just brought to mind the smooshing. So I wanted to build up a little bit of this color and just add to it. Now smooshing is very imprecise, but I love the randomness and the feel of it. So you have to give up a little bit of control, but if you're willing to give it a try, I think you'll be happy with it. It took me a long time to embrace this technique, but it gives a randomness and an organic feel to the page that you can't get any other way. So I'm just adding some more of this color to the background. Some of it's going on top of where I gessoed with the thick gesso, and that's okay. Again, we're adding another layer. So the gesso was layer 8, I believe, and now the smooshing is layer 9. Now I'm smooshing with a mixture of red and orange. The cadmium red and cadmium orange. I'm just mixing it to match the colors that were in that background. So again, I'm just mixing it on the acetate, adding a little bit water. If you add a little bit more water, it's going to give one tone. If you keep it a little less, with a little less water, it's going to give a different feel. And you can play with that. The only way you get good with smooshing is by doing it. When you get something you like, you stop and you dry it with the heat tool, and then you can smoosh on. I kind of go over where the orange trees are with the red, and that eliminated one of the colors. And then I'm using the teal. And when I chose this darker teal as opposed to the aqua that's in the background, it really brightened the page, and much bolder color choice. But I'm still primarily using or jumping off of what was given to me in the napkin. Now this works because we have basically red and green, and if you look at a color wheel, they're right across each other on the color wheel, and they will give off a lot of energy. I'm absolutely loving this page at this stage. It's got everything. It's got texture, pattern, color, contrast. If you don't like these colors, choose the colors that you want. If the color, I don't want this, if for smooshing, the red and the green, if I mix them together, they're going to make a brown. So I'm drawing in between to avoid that. And then I'm just adding a little bit more and just lazy man's smooshing, just to get that random organic feel. I'm quite happy with the background at this stage, so I start to edge the page with black acrylic paint and my shading technique that's called floating acrylic. I just want to frame the page with the black, and I'm liking the look of the black. I'm holding the page up because if it's wet, I want it to kind of drip a little bit into the texture that's there, be the texture from the napkin or be it the texture from the thickened gesso. At this stage, I think, well, what would happen? I'm going to do some drippage. Now, drippage is another technique like smooshing that's very organic. You got to give up some control. You put the wet there and let it drip. Let gravity pull it where it will, catching in the nooks and crannies of any of the texture that you have. I'm adding the black because I want to add some contrast, a little bit more excitement. You can always dab up the drips like I did, because everything is there is non-porous because it's been sealed pretty much with matte medium. And you can add some, dry it, add some more, and build up the intensity of the color that you are adding with the drippage. Here I'm adding a little bit of water, using my finger to help it flow a little bit. When you use techniques such as smooshing or drippage, because you don't have as much control, you end up with a very organic feeling, random page. You're never going to duplicate that. So it makes for a very original, unique page. So I'm happy with that, so I continue shading around the rest of this double page spread. This is the very last page in this mini DIY art journal. So I will be doing a flip through of this journal. And since I have another playbill, I will be turning it into a journal in that same video. And here I'm going to add more drippage that's going to get caught in the nooks and crannies of the thickened gesso. If you don't have thickened gesso, you can use modeling paste. It'll do pretty much the same thing. It gives a little bit more texture. Here I'm just adding more paint just to build up the intensity of the black there. And spraying it with water to get it to flow, to disperse into the nooks and crannies. And you can see I have the heat tool right there. I'm drying it. And you can see those swirls, those green swirls that I stamped very first, they're very subtle in the background, but they are very much still there. As is the gray tone pattern paper from the envelopes that I glued down. I'm putting some paint there and then adding water to get it to move and just adding a little bit more. The reason I'm adding black is I know that I'm going to add a sentiment to this, and I'm thinking that I'm going to go with a black and white focal image because there's such bright colors in the background. Although I will say this, I was going to put a poppy on this background, a poppy that's kind of that burnt orange red color. I think would look really nice, but I wanted to do something a little different with it, so that's the route I took. There's always options. There you can see the whole page, and I don't know about you, but I'm absolutely loving this background and how it evolved. Now, I said I was thinking about doing some black and white images, and I looked through my printables and I found this hourglass. This comes from supercoloring.com, I believe, and it's free domain, which means you can use it. And I've played with the sizing just to get the right sizes, and then I'm just cutting out the image. Fussy cutting around it. I'll put a link to the video where I show how I store my printables, how I've organized them. So there's that inside white area, and instead of using my scissors to cut it out, I'm going to use the X-Acto knife. Now, don't use a sharp blade. Buy extra blades and use a sharp blade and save yourself a lot of headache. If you like doing fussy cutting with scissors, you can cut this out with scissors. I prefer this for the inside pieces. I just feel for me, I have more control over it, and it's faster and easier for me to do it this way. I'm doing where the thin piece is first because it's supported by the rest of it, and then I'll do the other side. It's an easier way of doing it. If it does rip when you are cutting it, remember you can glue it all down, so don't panic if that happens. And there we have it. This is just printed on regular copy paper, nothing fancy. And there is the hourglass. And you can see how that black and white image really does stand out against the background, this bright colored background. I went and typed up a sentiment, and I mixed and matched fonts on my Word program. And it said, "Don't let yesterday take up too much of today." And I like that sentiment. Now I'm just playing a little bit with composition and making a decision. Do I want to keep these as rectangles with the extra white? Obviously don't, so I'm cutting it off. And the reason for that, the reasoning I have, is I wanted the words today and yesterday to stand out. I wanted that to catch your eye and go with the hourglass, and then the secondary words are much smaller. And for yesterday and today, I chose a bold font that's going to be really, really black and so it stands out. This is not in one of my sentiment packs, but if you're interested in purchasing digital sentiment packs that you can resize no matter what size your project is, you can check all my sentiment packs out at NinnysNapkins.com. There is a link and a coupon code in the description box. And just like I'm doing here, with any of those sentiments, you can mix and match them, you can cut them apart, keep them as rectangles. The sky really is the limit. And if you watch my videos, I do different things with sentiments all the time. And you'll get lots of ideas. By cutting off the excess white, I've also given more weight to the hourglass focal image and less weight to the sentiment. It's more secondary. I cut out one of the smaller hourglasses and decided that I'm going to add it as well. But before I do, I wanted to add a little bit more patterning, one more layer to my background. This is a silicone trivet, or a piece from a silicone trivet that I got at Dollarama for, I think it was $2.50 or $3, and it has that same pattern as the stencil that I used. I believe that stencil was called Screen View, and it's from the Crafter's Workshop, a great basic stencil that you would get lots of use from. I just wanted to add a little bit of fine patterning with black to my background. And I'm loving how that looks with everything else. So once that's dry, I'm putting back my images, finalizing the composition, and then I'm going to glue that down with my fluid matte medium. And because everything on the background is permanent, there is no water activated products, I don't have to worry about smearing or smudging or reactivating anything. And that's the way I prefer it. It just makes life easier. So if you're a beginner, my suggestion to you is stick to things that are permanent once they're dry. And then once you build up your skills, then you can start adding all those other water activated products, watercolor sprays, different things. but you're not really learning everything at once. Those are wonderful products, but you do have to keep in mind that you've used them and you do have to adjust what you do. I wanted to add more detailing to my page, and I love these dragonflies on this lily pond sign stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. So I'm just stenciling these out with black acrylic paint on a piece of scrap copy paper. And then I will cut them out. Ready for my page. It's just like a stamped image. So while I'm not using the lily pads on this, I did take note of these dragonflies. I love dragonflies. If you've watched my channel, you know I do. And this just makes a beautiful addition to any page. So I cut out 3 of them, the magical 3, and I'm gluing those down as well. You can build up your focal image. Lots of that beautiful background is showing, but we have a strong focal image too. I'm shading or highlighting around my hourglass with white. I'm using that shading technique, and I chose white. I just wanted these to look like they were glowing a little bit, and I wanted to lighten the background. If I put more black on, I was afraid that it was going to darken the page too much, and I didn't want to do that. But if you like using the black, go ahead. Again, you know, a lot of times just because I made one decision doesn't mean it's the only right decision. And I'm doing the same thing around the top, just adding lightness there. Here I'm going with the black around the dragonflies to make them stand out, and I'm using black with them because primarily they're white. Using my Posca pen to outline the sentiments. You got to be careful, there's texture on the paper, so you got to go a little slow so you don't get caught. And then I'm just outlining around the top or around the edge of the page. Final detail. And right about now, I am thinking I'm almost done. Decide to grab my white Posca pen and add some detail work to the printable. I'm thinking I'm done, but I'm also thinking something's missing. I thought maybe adding the white Posca detailing there on the hourglass would be it, but I'm still, while I'm happy, I'm still thinking it's missing something. And actually I was editing the page this video thinking I was done, and here was the done page. I had all the pictures taken, and then I decide, no, I'm not done. And off camera, I went and I painted the sand in the hourglass and the dragonflies and added gold splatter. So all that was done with gold, and it just brought this page to life. Do you agree with me? Or do you like it with all white, black and white? Answer that question in the comment section below. Does it look better with the gold sand and gold dragonflies? Or was it better before? Which do you prefer? Until next time, go get creative.